Well, Alonzi Alonzo. Hello, interwebs! I hope you are all doing well because I am here to review the first two premiere episodes of the Doctor Who spin-off miniseries, I guess, because I don't think it's going to get another season, called The War Between the Land and the Sea. And this is a very particularly interesting show, before I even get into the actual review of it, because it just sits in a very unfortunate place, I think, for this show in the current production landscape of Doctor Who. I'm not a news channel on this site. I just review episodes, so I haven't really been touching upon what's been going on with the Doctor Who franchise. But for those of you who have not been following the basic news since I finished my review at the end of Series 2, basically Disney Plus has decided to not continue its partnership with the BBC to produce new Doctor Who episodes. And once the War Between the Land and the Sea is done with, then their commitment to Doctor Who and the BBC is over. And now Doctor Who is sort of in a little bit of a limbo. They've announced that they're going to do a Christmas special next year that'll sort of probably, I think, tie up what's going on with the regeneration storyline and bringing back Billy Piper, whatever the hell's going on there. And then certainly we'll see where it goes from there, whether Russell T Davies will stay on or it'll be picked up by another company like Netflix or something. Certainly there's a lot of places it can go, and certainly it seems like they have some level of behind-the-scenes plans or are working on them, but it is not continuing with Disney, and it is a bit of a chaotic mess. And certainly, I think many of you probably agree with me if you watched my review of the Series 2 finale with Shooty. The storylines of Series 2 were also a complete and utter fucking mess. There were some episodes that I liked in Series 2 of Doctor Who, but the finale was terrible. There were some honestly just morally reprehensible episodes like the Interstellar Song Contest, and then just some messy episodes here and there. Not to say that the Doctor Who Disney Plus era was a complete wash. There was some really great stuff both with the David Tennant specials and in Shooty, but overall, we're just in a really bad place with Doctor Who. All that is to say that this show, The War Between the Land and the Sea, was, when it was announced, I was sort of like, like a show about the Sea Devils? I guess it's a unit show, but this seems just like a silly thing. I don't really think it sounds very exciting. Honestly, every piece that I saw about the show coming into it feels like it was like, oh, it's going to be like a Romeo and Juliet thing, but with, this guy falling in love with, one of the Sea Devils, and, they'll bond together and show that, love transcends all and that we can unify sort of thing. And it just seemed like a kind of a trite story for a spin-off series that just happened to center on Unit, like we've all been wanting a Unit spin-off with Kate Lethbridge-Stewart, but it's like, this seemed like just a weird way to do it. And then now, considering the show is in this limbo, it's like, all right, it's just going to get dropped, and I mean, it is being dropped now on BBC iPlayer, so I'm reviewing this now from BBC iPlayer. Don't ask how I did that, because I am not in the UK, And it's going to come out sometime next year on Disney Plus. So it just seems like a show that's in this weird limbo. No one's going to care about it. No one's going to see it. And that's, and so I myself sort of looked at it and was like, I don't even know what this is. Like, this just seems like a silly, pointless spinoff. And honestly, I was just kind of watching it out of obligation, to do these reviews and didn't really have any serious interest in it. I say all of this to say, like, this huge lead up to say, I was wrong. This show is, at least from these two episodes, really fucking good. And I frankly think it's fantastic and might, and this is hilarious to me, be some of my favorite stuff from the Disney Plus era of Doctor Who that we have gotten. At least judging by these two episodes, it could fall off the rails in its last three, but just this first 40% of the show, I am fully on board. I love it, and it is aggressively political in a way that I love. Like, I did not realize that this was going to be a sci-fi political thriller in the vein of something like Torchwood Children of Men was. If you did not watch Torchwood Children of Men, it came out years ago when I was a kid, and that was a political thriller set in the Doctor Who universe in the spin-off show that was absolutely phenomenal and some of the most horrifying political sci-fi I have ever seen. There's one episode of that show, I think it's episode 3 or 4, where you have these politicians just sitting down and basically justifying doing awful shit in front of us. And it's a very realistic, it was one of the most realistic things I'd ever seen in a science fiction setting, and it was horrifying. And it was one of the best and most depressing shows I had ever seen. Still to this day, it is that. And certainly, I will be honest that this show is not hitting the highs, at least of Children of Men, at least the highs of that one episode. Though, again, there's 3 episodes to go. But it is definitely in that same vein of being a show that is like, oh no, we're going to try and go for the fucking jugular on some of these points and make it kind of very clear what this allegory is going for, but in a sci-fi way. And frankly, I really, really like it. And it is better, I think, in some ways. I'm just kind of staying general because I know a lot of you have probably not seen it yet because, it hasn't come to the United States yet and all of that jazz. So I will get into spoilers in just a minute, but just for over top view level for folks. But when I say that it's political, I think it's doing it in a way that is very upfront, but in a way that is much better, I think, than a lot of the Disney Plus era Doctor Who stuff did. Now, look, I am very much someone who is all about woke shit. I love Star Trek. I love, I love my science fiction to be political, often sometimes didactically political, and being very upfront about, supporting diversity, supporting inclusion, supporting these things. But there is also a way to do it in a way that is not alienating and not beat people over the head. Now, again, I'm not agreeing with the asshole anti-woke people that are online. But the reason those people are able to get leverage sometimes in shows like Doctor Who is that sometimes the messages are very trite and performative, I think is what I would say. And I think about like the Doctor Who episode, the first episode back for Russell T Davies, where he had David Tennant declare like the Doctor is non-binary and relate it to a trans character. And I loved that idea quite a lot, actually. The idea of, presenting the Doctor as gender fluid and relating it to a trans character, I really, really like. But then you have like this moment in the show where the Doctor goes like, the Doctor is non-binary, or something along those lines. I forget the exact wording. And that just comes off a little bit like, all right, a little bit too much. And there's stuff in those episodes that I like where you had like Donna Noble like talking about pronouns with her grandma. Like that stuff was subtle and good. But then you have these sort of very overt didactic moments. And Doctor Who kind of did that a lot during the Disney Plus era. And it got a little bit frustrating, not because I don't agree with these statements and not because I don't want those things in my shows. I really, really do. But there's something to be said with, I don't even want to say subtlety, because sometimes I'm fine with things being like hit you on the head, but less like wink at the camera saying, we're saying this, kind of like, and you need to get it, sort of elements of it. And even sometimes it got very, performative in ways of like, Russell T Davies would have Donna's trans daughter show up at UNIT for no reason, just to be there and be a trans character. Very frustrating. Anyways, I say all that to say this show is using its political thriller base to very much talk about, like, I think like a little bit of a level of like pushing back against, colonialism and, people just taking resources that aren't theirs and killing kids that are from another species just to extract resources. And that is a very overtly political story, especially given context of stuff like what we're seeing going on to Palestinians right now by Israel. But certainly is not just unique to that setting. It is a conversation that goes across many different things, and so it is very political and torridly political in what it's talking about in the show, but it's doing it in a way that is using the sci-fi allegory, I think, really smartly, while not shirking away from what it is actually saying. And I really, 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 really love that. That is the perfect way, I think, for science fiction to be used, of being like, no, it is about this, but we're going to talk about the dynamics of it through this, even referencing specific political stuff going on. Like, we will, like, point at, like, yes, these political institutions are the bad guys here, while also still staying firmly in its own allegory and telling its own story. And then on top of that, this is also obviously layering in ideas of climate change and how we are failing, as the government systems, and like humanity and government systems specifically, are failing to push back against climate change because they have their own interest in perpetuating these things at the expense of everyday people, of working class people like us, and the environment, and just the earth in general. And I really adore that, of the show being pointingly at, like, no, it's these systems and these interests that are preventing us from stopping this. Again, this show is being very political in very smart ways, and I really, really love it. So that's my spoiler-free section. Let us get into some actual specifics of the show if you have watched it or don't care about spoilers. Starting off here, I will say Russell Torvey, I think is how you say his name. He is phenomenal in this. It is really funny to see him in this show, considering he played Alonzo way back in Doctor Who. I believe it was the Series 3 Christmas special? Something like that. Anyways, it's really great to see him back because he's really good, playing a completely different character, and he is just fantastic in this role, playing this everyday guy who's a little bit out of his depth and yet has a firm sense of kind of moral clarity about him that I really like. Like, he is someone who is a little unconfident in, like, I'm just an average guy in the middle of crazy shit, but he does have a sense of, like, no, this is what I believe. And you get this, like, enthusiasm from him at certain moments that he plays of, like, yeah, I'm, like, hyped up, this is really cool. And it's like, you relate to him very, very well, and yet you also understand his perspective as he speaks up to the microphone about, like, these are the views of, like, the average working day people in defiance of all of these things. So really love his performance. But obviously we get him being accidentally brought along on a unit mission to, to deal with a sea devil body that was found in the Mediterranean. I love the whole conceit of, like, he's just there on accident. Roger Trevik is, like, the guy who he's just a replacement for in their machines, and he's like, I shouldn't be here, but I ended up being here. And I like that the general is like, yeah. When he learns that, he's like, yeah, this was a mistake, but maybe that's how history happens. And also, UNIT, which is a non-specific national entity, requires a civilian observer. And so I liked that as well, that he didn't just throw him out. It speaks really well to UNIT. I mean, UNIT, we've had conversations even in recently as Disney Plus era, of UNIT being this militaristic faction, also very UK-based, obviously. But we get sort of allusions here towards it being a institution that is meant to stand for all of humanity. And as Kate Lethbridge-Stewart says at one point in the episode, I think presumptively, that we stand for all of Earth. But I like that it is arguing for, like, it argues for fighting for all of people. But we also get to see it as a militaristic organization that does things that it shouldn't. Like, at one point when Barclay, just jumping ahead a little bit, gets declared the ambassador towards the Homo Aqua, which I'll talk about in a second, they go over far and, like, get into all of his background, like, break all of his privacy. So UNIT is not entirely a great organization either. It has its own agenda, even if its agenda is more altruistic than most other more self-centered national interests as we see throughout the episode. So I really, really like that there is some tension with UNIT, with the character of Barclay in this. I also really, really like, and this was just a huge thing online, people were joking about the term Homo Aqua. I think Russell T Davies did an interview where he said, like, they shouldn't call them sea devils, it's a racist term, we should call them Homo Aqua. Obviously he meant that in universe, but that became a whole thing online being like, this is stupid, Homo Aqua is dumb, number one. Number two, it doesn't make sense just with, like, how genuses work and things like that. Also, like, to call it, there was people being like, to call it racist is woke, But ultimately the point in the show is, like, yeah, the term sea devil within the universe of the show is a racist term to call someone that. But I also like that the term Homo Aqua is just something that the military guy came up with. It's like, yeah, they look like Homo Aqua to me, so that's fine. We also get the scientists being like, no, technically they're from Trispondylus is what I wrote here. So, like, there is a scientist name for it. So all the people online being like, well, this isn't actually how you would genus it. The Homo Aqua makes no sense with actual, like, genusing. They have it in the show. It's just a military guy being the general being like, Homo Aqua. But I like also, too, there's some really good set pieces here, like the opening sequence where the like ground turns to water and sucks up those two agents, and the general comes in and, like, hears their voice, their thing under the water or underground is horrifying, and I really liked that set piece. But I also really liked once the Homo Aqua, I'll just call him for my own simplicity, comes up, they're like, we want to talk to everybody. We're not just talking to you in secret. We're talking to everyone. You're all going to have to deal with it. And there's some really great imagery. I will also say this show is shot really, really well. This is the thing I have with a lot of science fiction series today. This goes to not just Doctor Who, but Star Trek, even Star Wars does this. They shoot a lot in the volume, which I don't really like. This show, I don't know if they're shooting on the volume or not, but it looks like they went to a lot more practical sets and locations for the water aspect of this. And certainly there's a lot of CGI still being used here, like for when we're in the Imperial House, we have the water sort of set, which looked really cool, by the way. But it feels more grounded in a way that I like, and the visuals just look very stunning. The CGI looks really, really good and crisp in a way that I really enjoy, despite, surprisingly, the rest of Doctor Who kind of having that like glossy, kind of empty feel to a lot of its CGI sometimes. This show does not have that, and it really, really works very well. All right, sorry, I'm jumping around a lot because there's a lot to get into with this show, and I really, really like it. I really love the moment where Barclay references the Doctor, says, I saw him once. And he was, I forget his word, but he just is inspired by the Doctor. And that is a very clear moment of like, hey, we're set in Doctor Who, is a reference to that. But I also like that this sense of like, Barclay is inspired to be like the Doctor in many ways. And the Doctor has always had tension with Unit. In fact, at one point, Kate Lethbridge-Stewart, later on in the episode, when Barclay kind of does his own thing, she says it's like working with the Doctor, which I like. I like that as like we're relating Barclay to the Doctor in many ways, of like this voice who stands up for like the average guy. Will work with someone like Unit, but is not necessarily always going to agree with Kate or what Unit does. So I like that relationship there, and Barclay kind of wanting to live up to the ideal and be inspired by the Doctor. It's not overtly stated, but you see that subtle connection there that I really, really liked in the writing quite a lot. And I liked, finally, when we get to Homo Aqua coming up and having their negotiations. And I like seeing that there's different types of underwater species. There's the big fish people, there's the regular Homo Aqua, and then we have Salt, who I also really enjoyed. The more human-looking one. That is one knock I will say on the show, that obviously the person who is most human-looking is the one that we deal with most, so we can empathize with her a little bit more. Now, that gets interestingly... there is an interesting thing here that I really like with that, though, that we'll talk about in just a second, and then I'm curious to see if they're going to develop that further. Actually, I'll hit on this point right now, actually, just to make it clear. Like I said, my big criticism was like, oh, she looks the most human, she's the woman character, so it's like, oh, we're gonna have empathy thing, and also Barclay's kind of into her sort of thing. But then there's a moment later on where when everyone's sort of yelling at her and she's sort of like, people are getting angry, she turns into the dude fish. And there's an element that I really, really like about this. Because, and I'm curious it's going to get evolved even further, it almost certainly would have to be, is that she's presenting as a woman. Because that's the one that would do best in these negotiations. And when she needs to assert dominance in a way that humans will recognize, she becomes more masculine in a way that humans will recognize. Now, I'm curious if masculine... The thing that I'm going to be curious about what the show is going to do is if, like, her switching between masculine and feminine appearances is something she's doing just for humans, and whether she exists that way within her own culture, or if it's just something, like I said, she exists within her own culture. That'll be kind of interesting to me if, like, her gender presentation is just for dealing with humans. And I also like the idea of her being gender fluid. Quite literally fluid, like, and it's a subtle thing that like kind of speaks to cultural context. It also speaks to like gender fluidity and like how like she is something different than what humanity would deal with, because it would be very easy for the show to be like, oh, she looks like the most human, she's going to be the one that we're going to deal with the most. It's like, no, she's actually different than we expect. And I like that. I really, really like that. Especially putting it in a gender context. It is much better than Doctor Who being like, I'm non-binary now. Again, like that stuff. Like, again, it's not like I disagree with that point in Doctor Who. But here it is much more subtly done and more tied into, like, dealing with gender as, like, a cultural concept. And also, like, how we present to other people and performative natures of negotiations and things like that. So, really loved that as just a subtle idea seated here. Then we get into the negotiations. I like that they choose Barclay because he showed respect, and they want an average, everyday guy, not all these politicians' interests. And there's numerous points where they say, like, this is the politician answer. What do you want, Barclay? And I like that Barclay kind of gives the everyday human perspective. He's like, yeah, these corporations, these governments, they failed. We fucked up with climate change. We fucked up in dealing with the oceans. We fucked up in dealing with you. And speaking for, like, for lack of a better term, like a ground level working class kind of perspective, as opposed to like, oh, all these politicians and pundits and moneyed interests getting to dictate the terms here. And we see, I love that the reveal of the villains of the show being these politicians, these interests that are trying to push their own agenda. We have a U.S. military general, a French military general, and a British capitalist, all being like, we are going to try to push what we want and push out Barclay. And also, like, you assume that that's when Barclay sort of comes up and says, like, all right, well, we will try to reduce population and pollution by 2065. You know, that is a negotiated term by a lot of capitalists being like, well, 40 years we'll be dead, we can pull back some certain stuff, we'll have other options, whatever on the table. There's a very clearly like moneyed interest and national interest within that. And again, this gets into like the very overt politics of this, where homo aqua, Salt, says like, no, fuck you. We demand our oceans be sovereign. You cannot even go over our airspace, because on land that people are yelling like, oh, you can't dictate sky. But it's like, if you live in Russia, the United States can't enter your airspace. Why not for the oceans? They have every right, I think, to declare that within the setup that they have. I mean, I'm an anarchist and I don't believe in states, but like within the setup of these national boundaries and sovereignties, I think they have every right to demand something like that. And it has this like very like this anti-colonial force, because people have been extracting resources from the ocean, taking from the oceans, and they're saying, we're going to come back and like, no, we're going to use violence. We're throwing it back at you. Fuck you. Get off our land. Get off our space. None of this like negotiation time. This is our space. It's ours. And we demand it. And I like Barclay kind of having a tension with that, because he's like, my family almost got killed here. And when people are scared, they do stupid things. And Salt reads that as a threat. And he's like, no, this is just what, like, people don't know how to deal with what they understand, and you're presenting as a threat. And it's like, she's absolutely right in demanding these things. And yet there is that tension, and how do we negotiate this friction being presented in Barclay, not as just like the national interest, but as the everyday working class guy. And that's, again, really, really solid, like, writing and storytelling and political storytelling that is related on a human level that I really like. Again, Barclay and Russell is playing it so well, of like, this character's like constantly looking at reading things, trying to figure out what he wants to say, like being nervous, but then having his own opinions. Like, this could very easily just come across as like didactic and overt, but it's brought down in a very human way by Russell. I think he performs it very, very well. I'm sending a lot of praise at this. A couple like criticisms that I have here. They bring Kate back, which I like. Kate Lethbridge Stewart, she's great. But they also bring back her boyfriend. I like that they center that he's Arabic. He brings up like an Arabic phrase that his dad said at one point. So I like that idea. I still don't like the idea, and I brought this up in my Doctor Who reviews, that Kate is dating one of her subordinates. That's inappropriate. Feels weird to me. Do not like it. Also, speaking on negatives, I don't really like that Barclay's ex-wife kind of plays the jealous lover thing. Like, she says, I'm going to eat fish, which clearly kind of sets her up as like an antagonistic force, I think, for later episodes. And the jealous wife, ex-wife trope, or jealous lover trope, not my favorite thing. Also, if we're probably going to get into in later episodes a romance between Salt and Barclay, I'm almost certainly, and the jealousy will probably play into that. That's part of the show that I'm just not looking forward to. I don't like the jealous lovers trope. I honestly don't need a romance. I'd rather this stay on a political level. Certainly have Salt and Barclay relate to each other, but as a romance element of it, just something I'm not as interested in. But the show could pull it off, so I'll give them that. But even within that, the jealous ex-wife trope, not something I love. So that's one negative in a storyline that I already seeing being seeded here, that I don't love. Oh, some other good things that I meant to mention here. I do like that we, like, during the negotiations, especially at the top, like, there's this reference of, like, we use the term Earth, which is it's a very human-centric term. We don't mean that as a disparaging thing. It's just the word that we have. Like, I like that there's this recognition of, like, how human-centric so much of our language is, and that perspective. That's really interesting. And I also like that Homo Aqua, Salt, she learned all of English to speak to people, and we did not learn their language. That's also very telling of the presumptive nature of humanity there. Really, really good stuff on that front. Another good thing that I like is that we learn that the evil interests, the like U.S. military guy, the French military girl, and the British capitalist, to get the egg samples that they wanted, they offered a guy citizenship in the UK, and he's like, what about my mom? And it goes to showcase how, like, national citizenship and state power is used to manipulate and get people what they want, but then they'll still abandon people using immigrants and shit like that. Like, it's just very well done in a very subtle political way. couple other random things that I have written here. We have the fact that it looks like Salt has some sort of hive mind thing going on with the rest. They reference the mycelial network, and I'm like, oh, I know Russell T Davies, he's a big Star Trek fan, as has been very clear over the years, so I think he probably got inspired by Doctor Who for that one, which is kind of, or not Doctor Who, just Star Trek Discovery for that one. So liked that little, I don't know if it was, like, I feel like it was an intentional, like, reference, or like somebody's like, oh, I could use the same thing as Star Trek Discovery, get inspired by it, but I'm going to take it as a reference to Doctor Who, or to Star Trek, if I can say words properly. I'm just very excited about this show. Just to wrap out, I, again, am shocked by how much I liked this show. I don't think it's at the level of, like, Children of Men just yet. It has the potential to. Children of Men didn't start at the level of Children of Men. The first two episodes were rather slow as well of Children of Men before it got into, like, episode 3 and 4, which were phenomenal. So maybe the show will get there. But it is a solid, really great start, and frankly, it has the potential, I think, to be some of the best Disney Doctor Who stuff that we've gotten, which is very funny to me in one regard, and also saddening, because it's like, I feel like this is going to be the show that most people are not going to watch, compared to Doctor Who proper, especially considering Doctor Who kind of shit the bed in a lot of senses for a lot of people in recent years. So I think this one will probably not get the attention it deserves, but if I can do my part to say, like, you should go out and watch it, it's really good. I really liked it. But there's so many probably other things that I did not touch upon in this review. So let me know what you loved about this down below. I am very excited to talk about it more with all of you. We also got the pearl stuff in the neck, all that very cool stuff. Anyways, besides all that, I hope you, my friends, live long and prosper.